Ihsane Jarfi was born in 1979 in Belgium. He was born into a family of Moroccan origin. The family had been established in the Liège region for many years. He was the eldest son in the family. He grew up in a home where religion, work, and family cohesion were central parts of everyday life. His parents lived a religious life. They had clear values regarding responsibility, respect, and duty toward the family. His father, Ihsane Jarfi, later described family life as orderly and close-knit. He said it was characterized by strong bonds between parents and children. Ihsane grew up in and around Liège. He attended a regular Belgian school. He completed his schooling without interruption. The family described him as calm, polite, and adaptable. His manner made it easy for him to function in different settings. He was social among his peers. He enjoyed company. He had an easy time making contacts. He rarely took on leading roles. His manner was quiet and thoughtful. The relationship with his parents was close. It was also marked by a clear tension. Ihsane was homosexual. This was a reality his father was aware of. It was also something his father had difficulty relating to. Ihsane Jarfi has said in interviews that he did not understand his son's sexuality. He said that he reacted with silence and distance. He said that he withdrew. Conversations became fewer. Closeness weakened. This attitude created a distance between father and son. That distance persisted for a long time. Ihsane therefore lived a divided life. At home, he adapted to the family's norms. In his own social life, he lived more freely. Outside the family, he moved openly in the city's gay scene. He socialized with friends. He went to bars and clubs. He built relationships in contexts where he could be himself. For him, this was an important part of his identity. It was also an important part of his everyday life. Friends described him as warm, generous, and social. They said he liked to take care of others. They said he enjoyed conversation and community. Professionally, Ihsane worked in service and retail. He had various jobs over the years. He supported himself financially. He lived in his own apartment in Liège. He lived an independent city life. It consisted of work, routines, and an active social network. His everyday life included work, socializing, and leisure. The pattern was stable and predictable. Contact with the family continued alongside this life. Ihsane took part in holidays. He attended family dinners and gatherings. He had close relationships with his siblings. He was part of the family's everyday life. At the same time, parts of his life were kept separate. Ihsane Jarfi later described this as a coexistence. People lived close to each other. They avoided certain conversations. After his son's death, Ihsane Jarfi spoke openly about his regret. He regretted how the relationship had been. He said that he wished he had been more present. He wished he had listened more. He wished he had been more accepting. He said that he now sees his own fear and limitations. He described them as obstacles. They stood in the way of his relationship with his son. This realization led him to act publicly. He began engaging against homophobia. He began working for tolerance. But before all of this, Ihsane Jarfi was a man with a life. He had a family. He had work. He had friends. He had a social life in Liège. He was an older brother. He was a son. He was a friend. He was a colleague. He moved between the family's world and his own life. Between tradition and independence. Between loyalty and identity. That is who he was. Before everything else took over. On April 22, 2012, Ihsane Jarfi was in central Liège. It was a Sunday evening. He was in the city's nightlife area. This was in the neighborhoods around Rue Saint-Paul and Rue du Marché. He went to Open Bar. It is a gay bar in the city center. It is well known in the area. He had visited it before. During the evening he sat at the bar. He talked with other guests. He drank alcohol. Witnesses later described him as calm. They described him as social and approachable. He was alone. He was not with company. He moved naturally in the venue. He participated in conversations. He had contact with both staff and guests. Nothing about his behavior was reported as conflict-filled. Nothing was reported as unusual. Shortly before closing time, Ihsane left the bar. Outside the venue, several people were standing. Among them was a group of young men in a car. Witness statements describe that Ihsane initiated contact with the men. They spoke briefly. He then got into the car with them. The car was described as a dark Volkswagen Polo. Surveillance cameras in the area captured parts of what happened. The images show Ihsane outside the bar. They show him in conversation with the men. They show him getting into the car. There were no signs of force. There was no visible conflict. There was no struggle. Laugiel. Based on what can be seen, the situation appears voluntary. The car left the area with Ihsane as a passenger. That is the last time he is observed alive with certainty. During the night and the following morning, nothing is heard from him. He does not come home. He does not answer his phone. Contact is completely broken. The family becomes worried. He does not show up. He cannot be reached. This is unusual for him. The disappearance is reported. Police initiate search efforts. In the first days, there are few traces. There are no bank withdrawals. There are no phone calls. There are no signs of life. The investigation quickly focuses on two things: the last known observations at open bar, and the car he got into. Through surveillance footage and witness statements, the car is identified. The men who were in it are identified. Investigators map movement patterns. They analyze mobile phones. They trace the vehicle's route. At the same time, searches are carried out. They take place outside the city, along roads, and in more remote locations. Time passes. Ihsane is still not found. For the family, the worry grows. Ihsane Jarfi later described those days as a vacuum, a waiting without answers. Every hour felt longer because of uncertainty. He said that he still hoped. He hoped his son would turn up. He hoped he would call. On May 1, 2012, more than a week after Ihsane disappeared, a discovery is made. It is in a field in Villers-le-Temple. This is a rural area outside Liège. It is Ihsane Jarfi. The body is found on May 1, 2012. The location is a field in Villers-le-Temple. It is in the municipality of Nandrin. It is southwest of Liège. The location is secluded. It is along a smaller road. It is surrounded by farmland. It is not a place one passes by chance. It is a place one reaches deliberately. Ihsane Jarfi is lying on the ground. He is partially undressed. The body is severely beaten. At first glance, it is clear that the violence was extensive. His face is swollen. His body is covered in bruises. There are wounds and injuries. Emergency services and police arrive. They quickly establish that he is deceased. The area is cordoned off. Technicians begin thorough documentation. There are no signs of a struggle in the surroundings. There are no traces showing that the violence took place there. The ground around the body is relatively undisturbed. No objects are scattered. There are no blood patterns showing an ongoing assault at the site. Everything points to one conclusion. The body was placed there after the violence had already occurred. The forensic examination confirms this. Ihsane had been subjected to extreme violence. He had extensive injuries across his entire body. These include many rib fractures, injuries to internal organs, heavy blows to the head and upper body. The injuries are spread out. They indicate repeated violence over a longer period. They do not indicate a single attack. The autopsy shows that he did not die immediately. He survived the beating for several hours. The cause of death is determined. It is a combination of internal bleeding, organ failure, and trauma resulting from the extensive assault. There are no gunshot wounds. There are no stab wounds. There are no signs that weapons were used. The violence was inflicted with hands and feet, possibly with blunt objects. The injuries are consistent with punches, with kicks, and with stomping. The medical examiner also establishes something else. Ihsane was conscious during parts of the assault. The injury pattern shows bodily reactions. They indicate pain and defense. This means that he experienced the violence. The place where the body is found is not considered the crime scene. Nothing in the terrain supports that the beating took place there. Investigators conclude that Ihsane was brought to the location afterward, either dead or dying. This changes the character of the investigation. The focus shifts from disappearance to murder, from searching to reconstruction. The police go back to the last hours in Liège, to the car, to the men who were seen with Ihsane outside open bar, to their movements during the night. The investigation narrows. Investigators return to the last confirmed sighting of Ihsane Jarfi outside open bar. The surveillance footage from the area is analyzed frame by frame. Witness statements are compared. The timeline is built minute by minute. 4 young men are identified as those who were in the car that Ihsane got into. The car is a Volkswagen Polo. It belongs to one of the men. Through registration data, witness testimony, and camera footage, police can quickly link the vehicle to the individuals in the group. Their movements during the night are mapped through cell towers, traffic surveillance, and interrogations. During the evening, the men moved between different places in Liège. They drank alcohol, visited bars, and drove around the city. When Ihsane gets into the car, the journey continues. What happens in the car during the first minutes cannot be established, but witness statements and later interrogations show that the atmosphere quickly changes. The investigation shows that the car leaves the city center and drives out toward more remote areas. The route goes through several municipalities. Mobile data confirms the movements. The car stops at various times. Gaps in time appear. It then continues toward the countryside. When police begin to question the men, they give contradictory statements. Their stories differ regarding who did what, when the violence began, and how the situation developed. None of them can provide a coherent version. There are gaps, contradictions, and changes between the interrogations. At the same time, technical evidence begins to speak. Traces in the car, on clothing, and on bodies are analyzed. Blood, fibers, and biological material are secured. Injury patterns are compared with forensic findings. Everything points to the violence having been inflicted inside the car and at places where the car stopped during the night. Investigators reconstruct that Ihsane was first subjected to blows and abuse in the car, then dragged out and beaten at several locations. The violence was repeated, prolonged, and degrading. Nothing suggests a sudden outburst of rage. Everything points to an escalating situation in which several people participated. The motive gradually emerges. Statements in interrogations, testimony from acquaintances, and content in the men's communications show a clear pattern of homophobic attitudes. Several of the men express contempt, mockery, and aggression linked to Ihsane's sexuality. This becomes central to the investigation. When police confront the men with the evidence, their stories change. Denials turn into attempts at explanations. Responsibility is shifted between them. Roles are redistributed. No one takes the whole. Everyone tries to minimize their own part. In the end, the prosecution has a coherent sequence of events. Ihsane was taken into the car, beaten, humiliated, transported between locations, and left severely injured. He later died from his injuries. The 4 men are arrested and detained. The investigation is classified as murder with aggravating circumstances, including a hate crime motive. The case moves toward trial. The 4 men who were in the car that night are identified as Ihsane, Jeremy Winkins, Eric Parmentier, and Jonathan Lequeux. Ihsane is in his 20s. He owns the car, a Volkswagen Polo, and holds a driver's license. He is the one driving during the evening. He lives in the Liège region. Jeremy Winkins is also in his 20s. He belongs to the same social circle and has known Ihsane previously. He is in the car as a passenger. Eric Parmentier is in the same age range. He moves in the same social environments as the others, and is part of the group throughout the evening. Jonathan Lequeux is the youngest of the 4. He knows the others but has a more peripheral position in the group. He is also in the car when Ihsane Jarfi gets in. It is these 4 men whom the police later identify through surveillance footage, witness statements, and technical evidence. The trial begins at the Liège Assize Court in the autumn of 2014. Security is extensive. Interest is high from both the media and the public. In the courtroom sits Ishane Jarfi's family, with his father, Ihsane Jarfi, in the front row. On the defendant's bench sit 4 young men, charged with murder with aggravating circumstances and a hate crime motive. The prosecutor presents the case as one of joint responsibility. According to the prosecution, the 4 men together lured Ihsane Jarfi into the car, subjected him to violence, humiliation and abuse over several hours, and then left him severely injured. The prosecutor describes the violence as prolonged, repeated and targeted, with a clear connection to his sexuality. The court systematically goes through the sequence of events, from the meeting outside open bar to the discovery in Villers-le-Temple. Testimony, technical evidence, mobile data, and forensic reports are presented. Images are shown. Timelines are projected. Every movement is reconstructed. It is in this context that the 4 men are presented, one by one. Mulu Kazilaslan is described by the prosecutor as the driving force in the group. He owns the car, he drives, he makes decisions during the evening. The prosecution points to him as central in the course of events, both logistically and in the escalation of violence. Jeremy Winkins is presented as an active participant. The prosecutor argues that he was not a passive bystander, but took part in the assault and in the movements. His own statements and interrogations are used to show awareness and involvement. Eric Parmentier is described as impulsive and aggressive in his behavior during the evening. The prosecution points to him as one of those who exercised physical violence and who contributed to the degrading treatment of Ihsane. Jonathan Leque, the youngest of the 4, is described as present and involved, even if his role, according to the prosecution, was more following than leading. The prosecutor emphasizes that presence, participation, and failure to intervene are part of the responsibility. The defense for each seeks to break up the picture of joint responsibility. They point to contradictions in the interrogations, to memory gaps, to intoxication, and to the difficulty of establishing exactly who did what at which stage. Each defense attorney tries to isolate his client from the most serious acts, but the prosecutor holds on to the whole. According to the indictment, this is not 4 separate acts, but a joint course of violence. A chain of decisions, actions and omissions that together led to Ihsane Jarfi's death. The prosecutor builds the case chronologically, from the moment Ihsane gets into the car to the moment the body is left in Villers-le-Temple. The reconstruction is based on mobile data, technical evidence, forensic medicine, and the defendant's own statements. After Ihsane gets into the car, the group leaves central Liège. During the drive, the atmosphere changes. According to the prosecution, the harassment begins quickly. Comments about his sexuality, mocking slurs and provocations escalate. What begins verbally turns into physical violence. The car stops several times. At one of the locations, Ihsane is pulled out of the car. He is beaten, kicked, and subjected to degrading treatment. The violence does not stop after a single attack, but returns. The group continues to drive. Ihsane is taken back into the car, then out again, at another location. The prosecutor describes a pattern where the violence resumes every time the car stops. Forensic findings support the picture of repeated trauma. The injuries are spread across the entire body. Rib fractures, internal bleeding, injuries to the head and torso show blows and kicks with force. There are no signs of a quick lethal act, but of a prolonged course. The prosecutor places great emphasis on the fact that Ihsane was conscious during parts of the assault. The injury pattern shows reactions indicating pain and defense. He tried to protect himself. He moved. He was alive while the violence was ongoing. In the end, he is left severely injured. The group drives away. Ihsane is left behind. According to forensic assessment, he later dies from his injuries after several hours. When the body is later found in the field in Villers-le-Temple, the location is assessed as a dumping site, not a crime scene. The prosecutor argues that the body was moved there to conceal what had happened. In the courtroom, every part of the course of events is tied to the 4 defendants. The positions of the mobile phones, the movements of the car, the timelines, the injuries on the body and the traces in the car are placed side by side. The prosecutor presents it as a joint sequence of events in which all four had a part, either through action or by enabling it. When the interrogations are taken up in court, the picture is fragmented. Mutlu Kızılaslan admits that he was there but downplays his role. He describes himself as the driver, as someone who tried to calm the situation. He places the initiative with the others. He says that he did not actively participate in the violence. Jeremy Winkins admits presence but denies having struck. He says that he tried to stop it, that he did not understand the seriousness, that the situation got out of hand. In earlier interrogations, however, he described events in a way that places him closer to the violence. These contradictions are raised in court. This changes the character of the investigation. The focus shifts from disappearance to murder, from searching to reconstruction. The police return to the last hours in Liège. They return to the car. They return to the men who were seen with Ihsane outside open bar. They return to their movements during the night. The investigation narrows. Investigators return to the last confirmed sighting of Ishane Jarfi outside open bar. The surveillance footage from the area is analyzed frame by frame. Witness statements are compared. The timeline is built minute by minute. 4 young men are identified. They are identified as those who were in the car that Ihsane got into. The car is a Volkswagen Polo. It belongs to one of the men. Through registration data, witness testimony, and camera footage, police quickly link the vehicle to the individuals in the group. Their movements during the night are mapped. Cell towers are analyzed. Traffic surveillance is reviewed. Interrogations are conducted. During the evening, the men move between different places in Liège. They drink alcohol. They visit bars. They drive around the city. When Ihsane gets into the car, the journey continues. Exactly what happens in the car during the first minutes cannot be established. However, witness statements and later interrogations show that the atmosphere quickly changes. The investigation shows that the car leaves the city center. It drives out toward more remote areas. The route passes through several municipalities. Mobile data confirms the movements. The car stops at various times. Gaps in time appear. It then continues toward the countryside. When police begin questioning the men, they give contradictory statements. Their stories differ. They differ regarding who did what. They differ regarding when the violence began. They differ regarding how the situation developed. None of them can provide a coherent version. There are gaps. There are contradictions. There are changes between interrogations. At the same time, technical evidence begins to speak. Traces in the car are analyzed. Traces on clothing are analyzed. Traces on bodies are analyzed. Blood is secured. Fibers are secured. Biological material is secured. Injury patterns are compared with forensic findings. Everything points to the same conclusion. The violence was inflicted inside the car, and at places where the car stopped during the night. Investigators reconstruct the sequence. Ihsane was first subjected to blows and abuse in the car. He was then dragged out. He was beaten at several locations. The violence was repeated. It was prolonged. It was degrading. Nothing suggests a sudden outburst of rage. Everything points to an escalating situation. Several people participated. The motive gradually emerges. Statements in interrogations show a pattern. Testimony from acquaintances supports it. Content in the men's communications confirms it. There is a clear pattern of homophobic attitudes. Several of the men express contempt. They express mockery. They express aggression linked to Ihsane's sexuality. This becomes central to the investigation. When police confront the men with the evidence, their stories change. Denials turn into attempts at explanation. Responsibility is shifted between them. Roles are redistributed. No one takes full responsibility. Everyone tries to minimize their own part. In the end, the prosecution establishes a coherent sequence of events. Ihsane was taken into the car. He was beaten. He was humiliated. He was transported between locations. He was left severely injured. He later died from his injuries. The 4 men are arrested. They are detained. The investigation is classified as murder. It includes aggravating circumstances. It includes a hate crime motive. The case moves toward trial. Eric Parmentier admits parts of the violence. He blames alcohol, he blames the atmosphere, he blames group pressure. He describes the events as chaotic and unplanned. At the same time, the prosecutor points to statements where he himself describes punches and kicks in more detail. Jonathan Lequeux describes himself as passive. He says that he went along. He says that he did not dare to speak up. He says that he did not participate. The prosecutor confronts him with technical evidence. He is also confronted with witness testimony. This material places him in direct connection to the violence. The interrogations are marked by shifts. Versions change. Details disappear. New explanations are added. No one takes overall responsibility. Each account is adapted to reduce one's own role. The prosecutor highlights this as a pattern. 4 men who were together all night. 4 men who participated. 4 men who are now trying to isolate themselves from one another. In court, their versions are set against each other. What one denies is confirmed by another. What is first described as a joke appears in the next interrogation as a blow. What is said to have happened outside the car is later placed inside. The court is presented with every contradiction, every gap, every change. The prosecutor returns again and again to the same point. The violence was joint. It was prolonged. And it was possible only because no one put a stop to it. The defense enters with separate lines for each defendant. The strategies differ, but the goal is shared. The goal is to break the image of a joint course of violence and to reduce their own client's responsibility. For Mutlu Kizil, the defense emphasizes that he was the driver, not the instigator. The focus is placed on the fact that he drove, that he followed the others, and that he did not steer the development of events. The defense points out that the most serious injuries are not linked to him in the forensic analyses. They try to create an image of a more passive role. For Jeremy Winkins, the emphasis is on uncertainty. His lawyer points to intoxication, to memory gaps, and to confusion. It is argued that his statements in interrogation are marked by uncertainty, and that it is not possible to establish with precision what he did at which stages. Eric Parmentier's defense tries to downplay the nature of the violence. The situation is described as escalate, imla, as chaotic, and as unplanned. The defense emphasizes impulsiveness rather than intent. They try to distinguish between participation in a fight and responsibility for lethal violence. For Jonathan Lequeux, the line is built on subordination. His lawyer describes him as a follower, someone who was drawn along, someone who lacked influence, someone who did not have the ability to affect the course of events. An attempt is made to place him outside the most serious moments, and to emphasize his age and position in the group. Common to the defenses is a shared strategy. They try to fragment the events. They divide the night into isolated moments. They place responsibility in different places, at different times, with different people. The prosecution's overall picture is questioned. It is questioned by breaking it down into parts. The hate crime motive is also attacked. The defense attorneys argue that statements about sexuality do not automatically mean a hate crime. They argue that language can be crude without being ideological. They argue that the violence was not planned based on orientation. They argue that it arose in the moment. The prosecutor responds by pointing to the pattern, to the words, to the actions, and to the humiliation that was directed precisely at Ihsane's identity. The court takes part in the examination. Technical evidence is reviewed. Forensic reports are reviewed. Witness testimony is reviewed. The defendant's own accounts are reviewed. The court goes through every stage, every movement, every injury. The whole is weighed against the parts. When the verdict comes, it is clear. The court finds that the violence was joint, that it was prolonged, that it was marked by humiliation, and that the motive was linked to Ihsane Jarfi's sexuality. The hate crime classification is upheld. Mutlu Kizileslan is sentenced to life imprisonment. Jeremy Winkins is sentenced to life imprisonment. Eric Parmentier is sentenced to life imprisonment. Jonathan Lequeux is sentenced to 30 years in prison. The court establishes a principle. Presence is sufficient. Participation is sufficient. Failure to intervene is sufficient. No one alone bore all the responsibility. But everyone bore responsibility. In the courtroom sits Ihsane Jarfi's family. Ihsane Jarfi hears the verdict being read. He has later described the moment as empty, not relieving. He has said that no sentence can compensate for the loss of a son. With the verdicts, the legal process ends. But the case leaves traces far beyond the courtroom. After the verdicts, the meaning of the case changes. Ihsane Jarfi becomes not just a name in a legal record. He becomes a symbol in the Belgian public debate. The murder is classified as a hate crime. It has a homophobic motive. It is the first time in Belgium that a murder is legally established as homophobic. This gives the case special weight, both legally and politically. Ihsane Jarfi steps forward publicly, first as a father, later as an active voice. In interviews, speeches, and meetings, he describes his son. He describes his own inability to fully accept him during his lifetime. And he describes the guilt he carries. He speaks about shame, about silence in the home, about the distance between them. He links this directly to what happened, not as a cause, but as part of the context. He says that he wants no parent to have to stand where he stands. He founds the foundation Ihsane Jarfi. The work is directed at combating homophobia, at combating racism, and at combating violence. He visits schools, he participates in conferences, he meets politicians, he trains police officers, he speaks with young people, with teachers, and with parents. His voice becomes central in the fight against hate crimes in Belgium. At the same time, the case raises discussion. Discussion about the role of the justice system, about how hate crimes are identified, about how police, prosecutors, and courts should work with motive. The case is used in education, in legal contexts, and in public debate. It becomes an example of how prejudice can lead to extreme violence. In Liège, memorial ceremonies are held, marches are organized. Ihsane's name is used in campaigns, in school materials, and in conversations about tolerance and human rights. For many, he becomes a symbol of the risks that still exist for LGBTQ people. Even in a country with strong legal protection for rights, the family continues to live with the loss. Ihsane Jarfi has said in interviews that the grief does not diminish, that it changes, that the engagement gives meaning, but does not replace, that he lives with both love and regret. The convicted men are in prison. Appeals are examined. The sentences are not overturned. The legal process is over. But the consequences live on, for all involved. Ihsane Jarfi ultimately becomes more than a case. He becomes part of a larger story. A story about violence, about hate, and about responsibility, about family, about silence, and about reconciliation.